Welcome to the Shema podcast series, Strive for Truth. This series is based on the teachings of Rabbi Dessler, one of the most profound Torah thinkers of the early 20th century. In these conversations, I'm joined by Rabbi Michael Cohen, a longtime student and teacher of his work. This is not a series about inspiration or quick takeaways. It's about clarity, learning to see reality honestly and aligning our lives with what is real. Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Shema podcast and another installment in our series, Strive for Truth with Rabbi Michael Cohen. Guys, I wanted to try something a little different here. Since the beginning of this year, we've been going, I think the first episode of Strive for Truth was the very first few days of January. And we've been exploring the writings of Rav Dessler with Rabbi Cohen and discussing all types of topics from self-awareness, bias, blind spots, and the challenge of seeing reality clearly. But as we've been going through these essays, I found myself sort of wondering how these ideas actually play out in real life. You know, it's one thing to say these concepts on a page. It's another thing entirely to see how they show up in our marriages, careers, relationships, our spiritual life, our personal struggles. So today we're going to do something a little different. Rather than analyzing another essay, I thought it'd be valuable to sort of step back and explore the practical application of these ideas through the work that Rabbi Cohen does regularly with individuals through his coaching. You know, and I've discussed, as many of you already know, that Rabbi Cohen applies these principles in helping others navigate challenges, help them gain, greater self-awareness, break through patterns that may be holding them back. So I thought this would be a good, unique opportunity to see what Rav Dessler's teachings look like when they move from theory into practice. So I think my hope is that this conversation will help us better understand not only these ideas, but also ourselves. Rabbi Cohen, thank you for coming back on the show and doing this sort of special one-off episode that I think is going to give us all a much better vantage point of applying all these teachings in our individual lives.
Thank you. And thank you, Dan, for doing this. It's really exciting to do something different.
So let's begin by, we sort of know your backstory. I mean, anyone who's maybe just joining us for the first time, maybe found this video off from our normal podcast episode series, give a little background, like you told our audience in the beginning, how all this sort of led to you applying these principles to help out other people.
So really, I think what's pertinent for today is like my real breakthrough in my own life came when I was a rabbi in Young Israel of Oak Park in Michigan. I was a rabbi there for 10 years, and I found myself really feeling in a place where I was really stuck. And over my life, throughout the years, I had been learning Mussar. I learned from the best, from Rabbi Carmel, as you mentioned, who authored Strive for Truth and Michtav Eliyahu, but Rabbi Dessler Salomon and other great rabbis, Rabbi Shlomo Wolber, when I was in the Mir. And I'd always studied Mussar, and it seemed to really, I had just been really beating myself up most of the time. And I came to a point in my life where I was in the middle of I was a rabbi of this prestigious shul, 200 members, member families. It's a big shul, was the biggest Orthodox shul in Michigan at the time. And I felt myself stuck. I felt like I wasn't going. I felt like I wasn't really interested, and I didn't really feel people were being inspired by my speeches or by my visits or what I was doing. I didn't really feel I was making a difference. And I had an epiphany at that time, really in my learning of Rabbi Dessler, and I went to a particular seminar which really turned my whole vision of world view around. And as a result, I started learning Rabbi Dessler and started learning Mussar in a totally different way. And I really got something which I had never even imagined was possible from the learning of what people call Mussar. And people view Mussar as being something which is very negative. I found it so enlightening and so uplifting that it really changed the way I was being with my congregants, with my community, with my teachers, with my teaching, and it changed everything I was doing. And I really wanted to share that with you.
Great. I think that's one of the main things we've all have realized from these teachings is that Mussar sort of gets this rap as being a way of using self-determination and resolve to change external behavior. And what I've realized, what's unique about Rav Dessler is he's teaching how to change the underlying wiring that causes the bad behaviors to, happen in the first place.
Precisely. A lot of musas overlaid, and it doesn't really get down to the nitty gritty of your mindset and what's going on in your what you're thinking.
Right, 100%. So, what are you seeing as the most common struggles that people are facing today?
So people are experiencing struggles, marital problems, problems in their workplace, problems that they don't feel they're getting ahead. Those are problems that they experience. Those are the symptoms. It might even be if you talk to somebody who's has an addiction to internet or an addiction to alcohol or an addiction to whatever it may be. But that's not the problem. That's the effect of the problem. The problem is deep down within, and sometimes it really takes a coach to be able to talk to somebody and honestly to be able to get down to find out exactly what's driving the symptoms that are presenting. So a person might having problems with his kids, right? But what's the problem? The problem is he's got really a problem with himself. So there's something personal the guy has to work out in order to be able to have a great relationship with his children. But as long as he's not worked that issue out within himself, his relationship with with his children, and then that might show itself with the relationship with people at work and other people, other walks of life as well. The relationships we have, each relationship we have with different people is different, and it's important to really get to be present and to get to understand the person themselves in order to be able to understand what they're going through and what they're telling you.
That's so interesting because, and it ties into what we've been learning, that Rob Dessler's constantly pointing out is that we have so many biases and influences on how we perceive situations and perceive ourselves inaccurately that he's always encouraging us to get an outside perspective. So it sounds like people are coming to you with a symptom, making the symptoms the problem, but it's what you're helping them first do is understanding what actually is the issue.
Right.
Because they're trying to tackle the symptom versus tackle the underlying issue.
Precisely.
Wow. Okay. Many people in a Jewish community, even just I think everywhere today, are focused on improvement, personal development. People read books, they listen to podcasts, they go to seminars. It's like we live in an environment where we're constantly, people are talking about self-help and self-improvement, but it seems like the struggles are still there and manifesting probably in greater ways to some degree. Why do you see the struggles still exist? Why do people still have all these challenges these days?
You're right. So yeah, I lived that, and I know what that is. I've lived it. We're constantly approaching the symptoms rather than really getting down to what's behind it. So in the work that I do, we talk a lot about blind spots, right? Because we know who we are, we know what we are, we see the world around us, and we see the world we're interacting with. But often we don't really get who we are for other people in the world that we're at and how we're behaving, how we're acting. And it's a self-awareness that one has to be able to tease out. And the person can look at themselves and see how they're being in their relationships with their children, family, co-workers, with their money, with whatever they're doing. And they realize when we talk about a blind spot, they notice a blind spot. And then all of a sudden they have an epiphany and say, wow, I don't have to be that way. That's because I'm telling myself a story. And then it's a matter of teasing out, what is that story that you're telling yourself? When did you start telling yourself that story? And we discover incredible things, right? A person might say, well, I told myself that when I was a very young person, normally when they're about 7 or 8 years old, there's some sort of story that they told themselves. And then you get to realize that story is actually was true when they were 7 or 8, but maybe it's not true now. And they're thinking about it like a 7 or 8 year old because that's how they were when they first decided they were that way. And once they discover that, then they can discover that they don't have to be that way anymore. And actually, there's a whole new future lying for them, opening up for them. So what I've experienced is many people are driven by their past, and the past way of being and the way they act, the way they deal with problems. And that keeps coming up again and again and again. And if I ask them, they say, well, I'm looking at my past. I'm putting my past in my future. And they say, and I'm living into that past. But that's not the truth. Actually, what they're doing, they're putting their past in their present. And their past is dictating how they are today, which doesn't have to be. They can choose how they want to be today. And that the coaching is being able to learn how to choose how to be any day of any moment. And Rabbi Dessler, it's very interesting because the work is called, the term that's used by many people to describe this. Rabbi Sachs used this term, and other people use this term on program. That you use the term ontology, which is the study of being. So you study. I'm being the way I am today because of where I was in the past. But Rabbi Carmel actually uses that term to describe Rabbi Dessler's thinking, and it's a way of approaching life that you're working onto a blank slate. You're coming out to a blank canvas, and you can paint anything you want. You've got to create in life, and that's the breakthrough that I see with my.
So a lot of us are basically interacting with the world based off scripts we wrote for ourselves back when we were probably 8 years old. We realize we don't have to actually run those scripts.
And we're not being our authentic selves anytime. We're not actually connected with who we really are in any conversation that we have with people or any interaction we have with the world. We're interacting like that 8-year-old child because that's the way we've governed. We've told ourselves that's the way we need to operate. But that operating system is very old, and you have an opportunity to create a new operating system anytime you want.
Okay, so to continue with this idea, you talk a lot about self-awareness. That's what we're sort of talking about now. How much of our lives then are shaped by conversations we have in our own minds?
Right. So that's the thing. So everybody, it's in the coaching. The first step really is to be aware of the fact that there's a conversation taking place in our minds all the time. Our minds never stop. There's always this constant discussion. Is this good or bad? Is it safe or is it dangerous? Is it true? Is it false? Is it to the right? Is it to the left? Can I trust this person? Constantly. And that conversation actually gets in the way of our relationships. And it gets in the way of our being, right? You walk into a room and all of a sudden a person walks into a wedding. I give this example, right? Person walks into a wedding and immediately they've got concerns like, where am I sitting? Where's the smorgasbord? Where's the food? Who's here? Who's talking to who? Who can I feel to? Am I dressed the right way? All sorts of conversations which are actually taking them out of the experience of a beautiful wedding where they have the opportunity to make the husband and color feel at home and feel great and feel special because actually they're being taken over. It's their whole life as they walk into this wedding hall has been sabotaged by their brain. And so if you can get that brain out of the way, if you can put that out of the way, if you get that conversation out of the way and realize that that's actually not you, that's just a conversation that's taking place, you can actually enjoy the wedding. And life's like a wedding.
Right. So basically, instead of being immersed in an experience, we're analyzing how we're interacting with an experience.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And it's just experiencing.
Yeah. It reminds me of when my daughter was a young toddler and you wanted to videotape and take pictures of everything. Yeah. It was like I was spending so much time being a photographer instead of being a dad.
Right.
And just enjoying the experience of her being this cute little young girl. And I think you're right. We do that throughout our entire life.
Right. And what would it be like to be able to walk out into life and actually experience life and experience the people who are around you and really have an incredible relationship with your kids and with your wife and your family and experience and enjoy the blessings that you have in your life. We all have many blessings. It's just a matter of noticing.
How can a person tell the difference between reality and the story they're telling themselves about reality?
Yeah, so that's the work. That is really the work in coaching. It's to get the story. So I work with a client. I worked with a client recently, and we're going through a particular difficulty in interaction with somebody else, and he had made it mean a great deal. Right? This meant this, and this meant this. This means that. I'll give a very simple example, very simple, basic example. A person sends a text, and you read a text. And a text can change your life. You can be so angry, so upset. This person sent me a text. What happened? The person sent the text in uppercase. the person, we interpret that to mean this person is shouting at me. He didn't shout. He said the text in uppercase. It's a matter of actually reading the situation and saying, actually, I'm embellishing this a little bit because it's an uppercase. I really believe this person is shouting at me. They're upset with me. Maybe they just had the setting on by mistake and it became an uppercase. You don't know. So it's a matter of drilling down to actually what happened to get the story back down to things. There's exercises which I do. One of the fun exercises is I write down what happened. Okay, right now. Now write down again. Just take all the facts. Just write the facts. Then write it down again. Just what happened in one sentence. All of a sudden, this whole story shifts from being a whole drama to being actually one thing that happened, and it really didn't need that much, and everything's gone away. So it's that skill of being able to undress the drama of our lives and take it down to one simple idea and then deal with that idea.
So you're seeing often people are, the way they're interpreting events are typically being influenced in a negative way by those scripts that they wrote a long time ago.
We make meaning. We're a meaning-making machine. We make meaning from everything. This person's wearing this way. He's walking that way. The reason he's doing this is because of that, particularly in our Jewish community, right? We're judging everybody, and we're already decided about this person, that person, based on and how they speak to us and what they say and who they know and who they're related to. And we make meaning out of everything. And then they didn't speak to us. They did speak to us. They said something. They didn't say. The person might have just walked past and didn't notice you. Well, but he didn't say hello this morning. And that means, and then that turned to fester and that takes the whole day away. Just because the guy was preoccupied by something.
Yeah, he has his own issues and something he's struggling with, and we interpret it as him being rude to us, and we don't stop and think outside of ourselves that there's other situations at play here.
Right.
What are some of the most common ways our inner dialogue keeps us stuck?
Right. So everybody's got their own personal dialogue that they do. There was one thing that they told themselves, I can't do this, but sometimes it's like, I just can't, or it just, nobody loves me, or I'm not able to communicate. I'm not, and that walks around, or something that people just say, well, that's just the way I am, or it's everybody else's fault. I'm waiting for somebody to do something good for me. Everyone's got one sort of common dialogue, one common dialogue, unfortunate that one comes across in relationships is just, I'm unlovable. And people believe I'm unlovable. And then the person will say, I love you, I love you, I love you. And the person, no, you can't love me. I'm just not lovable. And that's a very sad situation when one comes across that. Often a person will say, I just can't, right? So they come up against issues about it. And instead of pushing through and coming up with a solution and working it out, they come up with it, I can't. And all of a sudden they're waiting for somebody else to find them, to feed them the answer. And it's sad to see, right? I remember I was one time speaking to a bar mitzvah boy, and I said, well, you know, why didn't it'd be nice if you to speak, you'll give a little speech, talk about your experience on camp. And they said, I'm not a speaker. Guy's 13 years old. You've decided at 13-year-olds you're not a speaker, but the rest of your life you're never going to get up and say a speech at your son's wedding because you're not a speaker. Who decided you're not a speaker, right? So we have people, and we have sayings, and in the community it's cynicism which surrounds us, right? Which is a form of dialogue, right? So there's the dialogue of I can't, or that's just who I am, or I'm unlovable, or I'll do it later, or I'm not a speaker. That's a sad dialogue. There's another dialogue which I just like to address, if I may.
Sure, please.
And that's like, we have this cynicism, we have these jokes, right? We have mother-in-law jokes. So automatically we assume that there's friction between a son-in-law and a mother-in-law. And it's a terrible way. We train our kids with this cynicism that they're mother-in-law jokes. So when a kid gets married, what are the chances of having a great relationship with your mother-in-law? It's already started. The default is it's going to be a negative. And that's tragic, because one of the best relationships a person can have is with their mother-in-law. It's a great relationship to have. And it's so sad that we create that, or we create the thing that the rabbi's going to speak for a long time and there's not really going to be anything for me to hear. And that cynicism, which I suffered from myself as a rabbi, because getting up to speak and you feel, oh, no one wants to hear what I have to say, How are you going to speak? What's it going to be like? Of course, it's going to be loud, right? If you get up there and you feel, oh, I've got something to say, and people are waiting for me to say something, it's going to be in a totally different speech. And those are the dialogues which we have and we've created in our community. And we really need to, as a community, to take responsibility and push them out. Right. And you know, those mother-in-law jokes are not helping anyone. They're not helping anyone. That's my
right. That's a very, very good point. They're funny though, but you're right.
They are funny.
But they don't help out anyone, and they definitely send you into married life with based in your subconscious that you're going to have problems with your mother-in-law.
Right.
By laughing at those things. So what makes this coaching approach different from other approaches that people may have tried? I mean, those of us who have been sort of going through these essays see the wisdom in these things. You're actually highlighting here the importance of having, like Rav Dessler, of having someone outside, always getting their opinion and getting their perspective. But just for someone tuning in for the first time, how would you sort of differentiate between coaching based off these teachings versus, different coaching approaches that are out there today?
So I think there's a 4-step process, but I would just start by this. The thing about coaching, where it starts, is this: we all have a view of ourselves, an opinion of ourselves, and sometimes that opinion, or at least the opinion that we say we have of ourselves, is negative. And a coach is somebody who can actually say that that's not the truth, who can be there for a client to say, you're actually whole, perfect, and complete. And you're a Tselem Elokim. And when you connect to that of who you are, an image of God, when you connect to that, you connect to your own greatness. So what happens is, I'll give you an example. A person goes to a seminar, they want to learn about happiness. So they go to a seminar and they're going to hear about happiness, or they hear a podcast about happiness. And now they hear about happiness and they're very happy for a little bit. And then they come back and then they tell their spouse, oh, I just saw this really great thing. So, oh, what was it about? It was about happiness. Oh, you're happy now? Well, no, I'm actually not happy. And that's why I went to the seminar about happiness, because I'm not happy, because the default is not happy. So a coach actually gets to be able to paint and put you in the place where you actually really are, which is you're sitting in happiness. You're actually sitting in calmness. You're sitting in tranquility. You're sitting in actually whatever mindset you want to choose, because you're actually an incredible created being who has the ability to sit in anything you're created by God. So that's the first thing a coach can do. And then create the awareness of what a person is doing actually to get in the way of that happiness. So it's not that we're unhappy and we need to prove that we're happy, and now let's do things to make ourselves happy. Let's focus on happiness and we're going to be happy. No. You're actually happy. You're actually sitting in happiness. And now notice those things which are taking you away from the happiness. Or you actually are patient. Notice those things taking you away from the patience. You actually are generous and kind. See those things that are taking you away from being generous and kind. So that's the first thing, is the awareness, the truth, the responsibility, and then the action. And once one gets into action, anything's possible. Because all of a sudden you see yourself and you've created yourself as a new being in the world, in your world. That's the fun of coaching. That's the real fun, to see those breakthroughs, when a person gets that breakthrough and they realize that, I don't have to be that way. That story is the story which I told myself from a long time ago. And that's really not who I am. I decide. I'm the one who's going to choose who I get to be today, because I'm going to choose. Zig Ziglar has a thing. He wants, people say, it's going to be a great day. So someone say, how do you know it's going to be a great day? He says, I'm going to make it great. That's the nature of Rabbi Dessler's teaching. Is the world is a beautiful world. And you know why? Because we're going to make it a beautiful world. We're actually going to actually be in action. And once you're in action, it's just a totally different world. But we create the stories, and we create the world that we live in. And if you create a story of a lousy world, of an unhappy world, a world where I am broken, then that's the world you're living in. And if you create the world where actually I'm a creation of God and I'm whole, perfect, and complete, and I've got a lot to give, and through the travels that I'm going through, it's about what I'm going to become as a result of this. and my experience in life is about who I can become, not what I can achieve, then it's a totally different life, and you're living a created life. And the way the Rabbi Dessler, I believe, felt life is supposed to be lived.
I'm glad you pointed that out and made that differentiation. I've seen, just like in the investment world my profession, where I speak at a lot of events and been to a lot of events, and you hear speakers, and it's like we have a society of inspirational junkies, because inspiration has a shelf life of about 2 to 3 days. And then once the inspiration fades, they go get another injection. But it doesn't ever build anything concrete, because I would run into people who would say like, "Oh, I like what you spoke about at the last event." And I would say, "Have you implemented any of those ideas?" And they would like, "No, I never got around to actually implementing." I used to be my joke at the beginning of a presentation, you know, as anyone, because you would see people taking these, copious notes on the speaker.
Right.
And I was like, "How many of you have looked at your notebook from last year when you were at this event?" And they're like, "It went in the dust drawer." So I think that's something extremely valuable that you're doing, is by getting people past the inspiration and getting them tool sets and skills to actually make some real, change in their life. And I think you touch on a lot of key things too, just having the perspective of being happy and joyful, which is a mitzvah, a
Right.
continuous mitzvah,
Right.
changes how everything sort of flows throughout the day and in
Right.
life. Can you share an example of a client who experienced significant breakthrough? Obviously, keeping all identities
Yes.
hidden, but just give us an example of someone, a challenge they faced, and sort of walk us through how you use this coaching based off these teachings to make some
Yeah.
real significant change for that person.
Yeah. So two examples come to mind. One is less significant, and was very significant. I'll just share with you both of them, if I may. One was a lady that I was coaching, and she came from a very affluent family. Baruch Hashem, her husband was doing well, the children in college, but she was really very particular about the people around her, very judgmental, and it was really getting in the way of her enjoying her life, enjoying any experience. And so, really got her to really turn herself inside out, and just to start thinking about the way other people are perceiving situations. The breakthrough came for her where she was on a plane, and she would normally have been really critical of the fact that she was in a middle seat and sitting next to a very large woman who came and sat next to her. And she would have really been upset. And she reported to me afterwards, she said, I would have had the worst 4 hours of my life being on that plane next to this lady who was overweight, sitting next to me and taking the armrest, and it would have been torture. But instead, what happened was this lady got on the plane, she took the middle seat, and she actually did something she'd never done in her life. She actually spoke to the person next to her. And she said, it must be really difficult in these tiny seats to sit in this place. And she said, I am so glad you mentioned that. It is so uncomfortable for me. And I feel so bad because I'm so big and I'm taking up the armrest, and I know that it's uncomfortable for you. And I feel really bad about it. The two of them had hit up a great relationship during the flight. She said she came off that flight. She had the best flight she had ever had.
Wow.
How often does that happen to a person? They got on a flight and they're just upset. This guy's taking my armrest. But she actually got to talk about it and get to open up to the person next to her, where she said she would never have done that. The other occasion, which was, I think, more drastic, more life changing for me, was there was a particular, she was very bitter. This lady was very, very bitter. She was complain about all things and everything. And she was a teacher and in a school, and the kids knew that she was very, very bitter. And I got to actually have the conversation with her about just things about life. And she didn't talk about why she's bitter. But in the course of conversation, she mentioned to me that she wasn't talking to her sister. She hadn't spoken to her sister for some 30 years. And through conversation and through talking that, she got to make peace with her sister, to talk to her sister after 30 years. And as a result, a short time later, she developed pancreatic cancer and unfortunately passed. But when she passed, she was so happy. Her whole life had changed as a result of her having peace with her sister. And that peace brought a peace to her, and she was changed. You could see her, her face was so relaxed after having had that conversation. And often I find, and there are other examples I could give, but where a person's relationship, even with Hashem, even with their tefillah, is hampered by the fact that they have a difficult, contentious relationship with a relative. And that goes, and we have paradigms in our lives. The relationships with our father is really the paradigm for a relationship with other men, and the relationship with our mother is a paradigm for the relationships with our wives. But the relationships we have with the people around us is also a paradigm for our relationship with Hashem. And when you're at peace with the people around you, you're going to find that you're at peace with Hashem. And that's why it's a terrible thing to have contention in one's life. That is probably the best thing you can do to actually get in control of those contentious relationships in order to be able to have that peace in oneself, inner peace and peace with the world. So those are just two examples.
Those are great examples because I was thinking that we tend to, when we think about personal improvement, our KPIs, our key performance indicators, the things we're measuring for success, accomplishments, financial goals, credentials, all these things that we're thinking that they're the measuring stick for improving ourselves are really sort of just nonsense, because really what you're getting at is what really improves our lives is when we improve the relationships around us. And even the woman who was on the plane with the other woman, by simply looking at it from the other person's perspective, expanded her and made her feel the joy in this connection, understanding from that person's perspective. Same with the estranged sister. So, and I think that's a key idea that you've talked about on the series and that you're discussing here, that you're right. That is the key of what makes life rich and rewarding, and really where our growth comes from, where Hashem put us in this world to connect with each other.
Right.
And that's what you're getting at.
Yes.
So what is the first step someone can take if they feel stuck right now?
Is to step back and just listen to their brain. So it's a type of meditation. I'm happy to share it right now. Anybody can do this. You just take a moment, and when you're ready, you can stop the video. But then what you'll do is like this: you just sit down and put your feet on the floor, and put your hands on your lap, and just and see what you're feeling in your feet, what you're feeling in your hand, in your lap, in your chest, and then notice the thoughts that are going through your head. And it's difficult to do that, but once you get to that point when you notice those thoughts, if they're going through your head, just notice that if you're noticing the thoughts that are going through your head, who are you that you're noticing the thoughts in your head? It must be that those thoughts are not. So now you have an opportunity to actually discover who are you that you're noticing those thoughts. That's where the fun starts.
Right. That's great advice, because you're right. We tend to live within the thoughts and define ourselves by the thoughts. And by stepping back, that's one of the first things you taught us on the series I've been doing regularly, is knowing that those aren't us. They're just the thoughts are coming through the mind, the way Hashem made us to interpret reality. We're constantly analyzing and judging, and just whether or not we cling on to them or not, or what we do with those is up to us. If someone's watching this and curious about your coaching, what would you like them to know?
You don't have to no one has to stay stuck. People are in situations and they feel that this situation is all encompassing and they're never going to get out of it. No, you're not. You don't have to get stuck. Actually, your life and the way your life can change from one moment to the next. You have the ability to do that. And it's not something that someone else is going to unlock for you. It's about you unlocking it for yourself. But sometimes you need somebody else to give you the keys, right, to help you find it. So that's the thing. There are great coaches out there. I'm out there, and I'd love to engage. And if anybody wants to take me up on a free conversation where we can just explore what's going on in their life, I'm happy to have a free conversation, and half an hour we could talk and see what's possible in their lives.
Wonderful.
So they were able to get in touch with me by contacting you through the Shema podcast, or I'm on LinkedIn, or my website. My email is rabbicohen@msn.com. Well, and I hope people will reach out there.
Great. And we'll put all your contact information in the show notes. Rabbi, thank you so much for taking the time to give us this sort of 30,000 view perspective of these teachings. And I'm looking forward to continuing to explore these essays with you one by one. It's been extremely enlightening for me, and I know the listening audience as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed the episode and found it meaningful, please take a moment to rate, review, and share the podcast.